Chicago, was commissioned to do a complete translation of the Book of Abraham scroll.
What this document really is an extended prayer on behalf of a deceased Egyptian priest, which begins with an invocation to the god of mummification, probably, certainly with a picture of the god of mummification, to ensure his continued existence, to ensure the priest's continued existence in the next world. And then it's followed up by a series of statements where, O deified Horus, may you walk as you had done in life. May your ears function, may your eyes function, may the gods receive you. Long series of invocations on this, essentially ensuring that this dead priest is able to function in death as he had in life, but now as part of a company of the ancient Egyptian gods. Abraham is not mentioned once.
From the evidence that we have today, it's quite safe to say that Joseph Smith did not have the Book of Abraham or the Book of Joseph in front of him in the form of these papyri, because they bear no relationship to those to the contents of the stories or to his translation.
We wanted to get an official Mormon explanation of how the church today understands the Book of Abraham. However, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints declined our request for an interview. Michael Purdy of the church's Public Affairs Department did refer us to this book by Mormon scholar John Gee.
Dr. Gee puts forth the position that other than the original of Facsimile 1, the papyrus fragments given to the church in 1967 were not the portion of the papyri that contained the text of the Book of Abraham. He claims the scroll Joseph used was originally 10 feet long, and that there was a large section that is now missing, which may have contained the lost book.
There's certainly no reason that this particular Book of Breathing scroll should be expanded much beyond the surviving length. I've now read the entire document from the beginning to the end and made out what one could make out on the poor copy of the final vignette. The most that is missing from this text is simply 2 columns worth of Egyptian hieratic and possibly a small vignette. But other than that, there would be nothing more that would inflate its length much beyond its current size. It is both unprecedented and unreasonable to assume that an intrusive text about a completely different matter, a narrative history of Abraham and his descendants, would have been inserted into a document whose beginning, middle, and end is devoted specifically to the resurrection of an Egyptian priest. It would disrupt the document. It would have nothing to do with its content. It would be unprecedented. No other document would have such a thing. And the narrative style of the Book of Abraham does not correspond to Egyptian verbiage. It's not the kind of thing Egyptians would say. They wouldn't say it in that way. And it certainly would never appear in such a context as this. It couldn't possibly be more out of place.
Another Mormon scholar, Michael D. Rhodes of Brigham Young University, writing in the Encyclopedia of Mormonism, argues that Joseph Smith may have received the Book of Abraham by direct revelation from God, and only used the papyri to illustrate what he learned from revelation. Rhodes writes, "When studying the Egyptian papyri purchased from Michael Chandler, Joseph Smith sought revelation from the Lord concerning them, and received in that process the Book of Abraham. He might then have searched through the papyri in his possession to find illustrations similar to those he had learned by revelation."
Nowadays, it's kind of popular to say, well, Joseph Smith didn't claim to be translating. He just saw these illustrations and then was inspired with the text of the Book of Abraham. But it doesn't say in Joseph Smith's diary, kept at the time, that he was looking at the pictures or the illustrations and then was inspired to give a story that we now know as the Book of Abraham, but rather that he was translating these characters.
This afternoon, I labored on the Egyptian alphabet in company with brothers. This afternoon, I recommenced translating from the ancient records. I returned home and spent the day in translating the Egyptian records. And in the afternoon, we translated some of the Egyptian records.
And it seems clear that he said, and it doesn't just seem clear, it is clear from this statement that he was making the translation from characters or hieroglyphics.
Michael Rhodes of Brigham Young University also claims in the Encyclopedia of Mormonism that Joseph Smith's explanations of the facsimiles are accurate. Quote, "The prophet's explanations of each of the facsimiles accord with present understanding of Egyptian religious practices."
I want to be absolutely clear on this. There simply is no justification for the kind of interpretations that appear in facsimile 1 or facsimile 3. They are wrong with regard to the hieroglyphs, they are wrong with regard to the gender, they are wrong with regard to the understanding of what the scene actually represents, and where they are used in the body of the text, they are wrong there as well. In short, there is no historical validity for the interpretations in that book. None whatsoever.
You cannot find outside discussion of this particular set of facsimiles any Egyptologist who would be discussing it in this way.
But the thing about that's interesting is none of those theories in the church existed. No one ever talked about them. No one ever even thought about them until after, that is the post-November 1967 time period, and where people are coming up with new explanations.
When one looks at the evidence simply with common sense, it becomes clear that Joseph Smith claimed that he was translating from these documents, but in fact there's no correlation between his Book of Abraham and these ancient documents, and therefore it simply can't be a translation. All of the other explanations have grown up in order to sort of put the finger in the dike, as it were, to prevent the dike from breaking. But the clear evidence is that Joseph Smith did not translate this document. It's not a document from antiquity.
The Foundation for Ancient Research and Mormon Studies, FARMS, here at Brigham Young University, specializes in the defense of the Mormon Scriptures. We wanted to interview their experts about the Book of Abraham, but they did not respond to our repeated requests for an interview. Since we couldn't get an official response from the Mormon church leadership, we went to find out how rank-and-file members of the church feel about the Book of Abraham today.
The Book of Abraham makes no illusions that it's some kind of allegorical scripture. It clearly states that it is written from Abraham, by Abraham, and in the perspective of Abraham's life and times.
From what I understand, the Book of Abraham is writings written by the prophet Abraham in his time, and that it was recovered by Joseph Smith and then later translated.
That's how I interpret it. That's how I believe it to be, that Joseph Smith, called as a prophet when he was instructed to translate. And in this case, the Book of Abraham were, direct words from Abraham, translated by the prophet Joseph Smith, so that we could gain knowledge that we didn't previously have.
The Book of Abraham, we believe, is the story of Abraham. Again, just a few chapters, only 5 chapters, which, interestingly enough, although it shares some insights about Abraham, it actually is the only source in all 4 of the standard works that really delves into some key doctrines that become pivotal to the LDS faith. Chief of these is the concept of the preexistence and the nature of man and our relationship to God. Many of these things, of course, are hinted at in other of the standard works, but I would say the Book of Abraham nails it the best and makes it the clearest and is most easily understood.
I know that there is a lot of evidence both ways, that can go both ways, as there is about a lot of things about cancer research. This causes cancer, this doesn't. And I know that it can be confusing. But I think that what it boils down to is asking God for yourself and praying about it and studying